that his lordship then swore by the living God that if a grain of powder was burnt at Captain Foy or Captain Collins, or if any injury or insult was offered to himself or either of them, that he would declare freedom to the slaves and reduce the city of Williamsburg to ashes. His lordship then mentioned letting up the royal standard, but did not say that he would actually do it, but said he believed, if he did, he should have a majority of white people and all of the slaves on the side of the government, that he had once fought for the Virginians, and that by God he would let them see that he could fight against them, and declared that in short time he could depopulate the whole country. This is an account of a visitor to Governor Dunmore in 1775 in the aftermath of an event that would shatter British authority in Virginia and move the colony one step closer to revolution. Hello, I'm Clarissa Sanders, and this is Clarissa Explains, a podcast that explores historical events and why they matter. This season, we are commemorating the 250th anniversary of the United States by taking a look at historic sites in Virginia and their roles during the American Revolution. When we talk about the American Revolution in Virginia, there are countless places we could talk about, from battlefields and grand colonial homes to indigenous landscapes and the spaces where Black Virginians lived, worked, and resisted. This season, we're going to explore as many of those as we can. And this month, we're looking at the seeds of revolution and the places where revolutionary thought and action started right here in Virginia. Today, we're headed back to Williamsburg to talk about the Governor's Palace and explore what happened there and why it matters. Situated at the end of a long stretch of grass called a green, behind a gate that depicts the Lion of England and the Unicorn of Scotland, sits the second largest building in colonial Williamsburg, the Governor's Palace. This Georgian mansion, built between 1706 and 1722, was funded by the Virginia Assembly as a visual representation of the wealth and power of the colony and the crown. In 1705, the General Assembly allotted £3,000 for the construction of the palace and for a few outbuildings on the property. The act outlined the dimensions of the house, provided funds for the creation of a stable and kitchen, and gave the overseer the ability to order supplies and, quote, to buy such and so many slaves, horses, carts, and other materials, as is his discretion he shall think fit for the most expeditious and cheap carrying out of said work. The cost of completing the Governor's Palace escalated quickly, the General Assembly approving additional funds including £900 in 1712 and $250 in 1718. The General Assembly became disgruntled with Lieutenant Governor Spotswood and in 1718 wrote a list of complaints, including his management of the construction of the palace. It read, his construction of the law for finishing the governor's house, whereby he lavishes away the country's money contrary to the intent of the law and even beyond what the words of law will bear, and have hitherto refused any redress within. In order to defray the cost of construction, the Assembly imposed a duty of 20 shillings on Africans who were forcibly brought to the colony as enslaved people. 3 enslaved people who were purchased to work on the palace were also sold to defray cost. The Governor's Palace was built by and paid for by the labor of enslaved people. Eventually, this costly but imposing home was completed. It served as the home of 5 lieutenant governors, including Alexander Spotswood, 2 royal governors, including John Murray, Earl of Dunmore, and 2 elected governors, including Patrick Henry and Thomas Jefferson. From archival and archaeological evidence, we know that the interior of the Governor's Palace matched the grandeur of its exterior. The best example of this is the stunning vestibule visitors entered from the front door. The floors were made out of a white purebeck, a marble imported from the Isle of Purbeck in England, and checkered with black marble. The walls illustrated the might of the colony with hundreds of swords and firearms decorating them. The opulence continued throughout the palace through stately woodwork, lavish furniture, and extravagant entertainment spaces like the ballroom that was added in the 1750s. Each part of the public-facing portions of the home were meant to communicate the wealth and power of the Crown and Virginia. In 1781, the original Governor's Palace burned down. What stands on the site now is a reconstruction built by Colonial Williamsburg as part of a larger mission to save and restore Virginia's colonial capital. The Governor's Palace opened to the public on April 23, 1934. While the site of the Governor's Palace could tell many stories of colonial Virginia, Today we're going to focus on the residence when it served as the home of John Murray, Earl of Dunmore, and the royal governor of Virginia leading up to the American Revolution. Dunmore's life story feels like a period drama. He served as a page to Bonnie Prince Charlie during the Jacobite Rising. His family was put on house arrest after the Battle of Culloden. His family was eventually pardoned, and he received a commission in the British Army during the 7 Years' War. He served in the House of Lords, and he built a summer house known as the Pineapple because it has a 37-foot cupola shaped like a tropical fruit. And we haven't even gotten to his time in Virginia yet. Dunmore was appointed to the royal governor of New York in 1770, and just 3 months later, he was appointed to Virginia, and he wasn't really thrilled about it. He begrudgingly took his place in Virginia on September 25, 1771. Dunmore's relationship with the colonists of Virginia was an absolute roller coaster. He worked to integrate his family into colonial society as best he could, sending his sons to William and Mary, purchasing land and slaves, and even naming his daughter Virginia. As we discussed last week, in the spring of 1774, the General Assembly called for a day of fasting and prayer for Boston after the intolerable acts were passed. Dunmore responded by dissolving the General Assembly, leading the House of Burgesses to meet at Raleigh Tavern, which obviously increased tensions. By the fall of 1774, though, public opinion on Dunmore had improved after the conflict between the Shawnee and Mingo and the Virginians, known as Dunmore's War, came to a favorable end for the governor. By October, the Shawnee signed a treaty which solidified Virginia's hold on the land south of the Ohio and made travel and settlement to Kentucky possible. But by 1775, any goodwill Dunmore had secured was gone. In January, the Virginia Gazette published news that left many colonists on edge. It read, "We have authority to inform the public that the Right Honorable Earl of Dartmouth has written circular letters to several governors of the continent, signifying His Majesty's command that they take the most effectual measures for arresting, detaining, and securing any gunpowder, or any fort or arms or ammunition which may be attempted to be imported to the colonies, and likewise enclosing an order to the King and Council, prohibiting the exportation thereof from Great Britain or Ireland." Colonists responded by setting up their own patrols of local stores of ammunition. Some evidence, though, suggests that by the spring, those had become lax. Then, in April, under the cloak of night, around 3 or 4 a.m., Dunmore ordered Marines to remove the gunpowder from the magazine in Williamsburg. The Marines took the gunpowder to their nearby ship and disabled the guns in the magazine by removing the fire locks. When locals discovered what happened, they were outraged. While white colonists were comparing their plight under English rule to that of a slave, actual enslaved people were pushing against the institution that held them in bondage. Throughout Virginia, enslaved people were rebelling and choosing freedom for themselves at a rate that left colonists worried about a large-scale insurrection. This fear is what turned to anger when they realized the gunpowder had been taken, because they felt like they were left defenseless against a real and possible threat. A mob gathered near the governor's palace, and for a moment, it seemed like the gathering was going to turn into a mob storming the governor's home. Local leaders were able to de-escalate the situation after meeting with Dunmore and prevented things from turning violent. On April 22nd, leaders from Williamsburg shared what happened in a letter that they addressed to Dunmore. They stated that, quote, "The inhabitants of this city were this morning exceedingly alarmed by a report that a large quantity of gunpowder was in the preceding night, while they were sleeping in their beds, removed from the public magazine in the city, and conveyed under an effort of Marines on board one of His Majesty's armed vessels lying a ferry on James River." They went on to suggest that the powder shouldn't have been moved because it was paid for by Virginians to be there in, quote, "cases of invasions or insurrections," and they had, quote, "too much reason to believe that some wicked and designing persons have instilled the most diabolical notions in the minds of our slaves, and that therefore utmost attention to our internal security is become the most necessary." They concluded their letter by asking the governor why the powder was moved and for it to be returned immediately. Dunmore's response was published in the Gazette the same day alongside the letter from city leaders. It read, that hearing of an insurrection in a neighboring county, he had removed the powder from the magazine, where he did not think it secure, to a place of perfect security, and that upon his word and honor, whenever it was wanted on any insurrection, it should be delivered in half an hour, that he had removed it the night time to prevent any alarm, and that Captain Collins had his express command for the part he had acted. He was surprised to hear the people were under arms in this occasion, and that he should not think it prudent to put powder in their hands in such a situation. A few days later, when talking to a visitor who had come to the palace, Dunmore said that if the colonists had been violent, he would have freed the enslaved population because he believed that they would have joined his side. This is where the quote from today's episode came. As news of what happened reached other parts of Virginia through word of mouth and the press, some colonists began assembling local militias. In Hanover, Patrick Henry was elected as the militia's leader, and they marched towards Williamsburg demanding compensation for the powder that was taken. Dunmore once again threatened to free enslaved people if the militia made its way to Williamsburg. Peyton Randolph wrote a note to them to keep them away. Dunmore agreed to reimburse them for the powder that was taken, but couldn't leave it there. He also issued a proclamation calling Henry out. It read, "Whereas I have been informed from undoubtable authority that a certain Patrick Henry of the county of Hanover and a number of deluded followers have taken up arms, chosen their officers, and, styling themselves an independent company, have marched out of their county, encamped, and put themselves in a posture of war, and have written and dispatched letters to divers parts of the country, exciting the people to join in this outrageous and rebellious practices, to the great terror of all of His Majesty's faithful subjects, and in open defiance of law and government, and have committed other acts of violence, particularly in extorting from His Majesty's Receiver General the sum of 330 pounds under the pretense of replacing the powder I thought proper to order from the magazine, whence it undeniably appears that there is no longer the least security for life or property of any man. Wherefore, I have thought proper, with the advice of His Majesty's Council and His Majesty's name, to issue this my proclamation, strictly charging all persons upon their allegiance not to aid, abet, or give countenance to the said Patrick Henry or any other persons concerned in such unwarrantable combinations, but, on the contrary, to oppose them, their designs, by every which means, which designs must otherwise inevitably involve the whole country in this most direful calamity, as they will call for the vengeance of offended majesty and the insulted laws to be exerted here to vindicate the constitutional authority of the government." This threat from Dunmore was real, as colonists had already seen happen in Massachusetts when the arms and gunpowder there were seized and triggered the Battle of Lexington and Concord. In Virginia, tensions remained high, but again, violence here was averted. Things, though, didn't remain calm for long. In June, colonists broke into the magazine, triggering a gun that had been set as a trap, leaving several young men wounded. People were again outraged, and this was the last straw for Dunmore. In June of 1775, he and his family, who feared for their safety, boarded a ship and left Williamsburg. While Dunmore attempted to continue to leave Virginia on the ship, his departure from the governor's palace pretty much dissolved English control in Virginia. While the gunpowder isn't the end of John Murray, Earl of Dunmore's story, we will definitely see him again later this season, it is the end of his ties to the governor's palace. After his departure, colonists took control of the home, first taking the guns and swords from the walls, and eventually turning it into Virginia's first elected governor's house, Patrick Henry. So, why does it matter? The governor's palace served as a grand symbol of British wealth and power in colonial Virginia. When Dunmore removed the colony's gunpowder in 1775, angry colonists gathered outside the building, and some even threatened to storm it, which was them openly challenging British authority. After Dunmore fled Williamsburg, Virginians quickly took over the property and transformed it into the home of a new kind of leader, one chosen by the people, well, at least some of them. But the story goes beyond a political transfer of power. Following the Gunpowder Incident, Dunmore threatened to emancipate enslaved people if colonists continued to resist British rule, and later that year, those threats became a reality through Dunmore's proclamation, something we'll definitely talk about later this season. His actions revealed something many traditional narratives of the American Revolution leave out. The Revolution was not only about taxes and representation, it was also deeply connected to slavery, freedom, and who was allowed to claim the idea of liberty. That tension matters because it reminds us that the promises of the American Revolution were never equally shared. Understanding places like the Governor's Palace and figures like Lord Dunmore helps us see that the Revolution was not simply a story of patriots versus the British, but as a complicated struggle over power, liberty, race, and belonging, questions that continue to shape the United States today. Thank you for listening to Clarissa Explains. For those of you who are familiar with colonial Williamsburg, the Powder magazine might have seemed like a better site for today's episode, but it's currently closed for restoration. If I'm going to talk about a cool place, I want to make sure that there are places that you can go and see. Anyway, thank you for joining me as we explore the history of some of Virginia's most interesting sites. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to follow and leave a review so fellow history lovers can find us. For show notes on today's episode or more information about the show, please visit our website at clarissaexplains.org. Until next time, remember, understanding history starts with asking the right questions, and we're here to explain it one story at a time.